Hello folks, and welcome to this lesson on how to build your own text generation application. It's going to be very exciting, so if you like code, I hope you bear with me through some of the slides, but you'll definitely see some code and a running application. Yeah, as I said, this lecture, this lesson is all about how to build your own text generation applications. This is a lesson that's part of a curriculum called Generative AI for Beginners. My name is Chris Noring. I work for Microsoft. So the learning goals of this lesson is that you'll be able to know a few things and build a few things. So for example, you'll be able to explain what a text generation application really is. The other part is that you're going to be able to build your own app. Talking to OpenAI model or an Azure OpenAI model, you'll also learn something about how you can configure your app to decide how many tokens you use to be either economical or make sure that you get a big response back. We'll also talk about temperature, because sometimes you just want a response that's very deterministic. You get the same thing every time, and sometimes you want something that's completely random. There are use cases for both, and we'll talk about how we can achieve that. What even is a text generation application, you might wonder? Well, it takes text in as input, and it generates text as output. So that's really how simple it is. And of course, what we're sending this input to is an LLM, a large language model, and out comes a response from this model that hopefully is what you need it to be. And of course, there are different types of applications that we could be building. We will talk about command-based applications today using a terminal. That's a great start, but you might want to make that into a graphical application, either as a desktop application or a web application. The point is that some kind of graphical applications has a different ways of communicating with you, right? Because you might use buttons and text boxes and drop downs and things like that. So two different kind of apps, so you need to select which one you want. We are talking about text generation applications, I believe, because we realize that there are limitations with normal apps, right? Especially if we're working with command-based apps, because right now when you write code, you might write it in English, right? But your user might be Spanish speaking and doesn't know English, so they're gonna have a hard time working with your command-based app. So what do? Well, you might use some kind of translation service, or you might actually create code that just, prints everything in Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language that you need it to be instead. So that's a lot of extra work for you. But here's the thing. When you use an LLM, the commands you send, the text input, can be any language that the LLM is trained on, which is a lot of different languages. So there are some huge benefits to working with an LLM where you send commands and you get some kind of response back. Now, to build an app, there are a few things we need to do, some decisions that we need to make. So for one, we need to pick a programming language. There are a lot of different choices out there. So if you want to work with an LLM, if you work very close to the metal, no frameworks or SDKs or anything, you can just do web requests, right? And you can use so many different languages to just do web requests. But if you want to use a library, then you are somewhat limited to what libraries exist out there for what languages. But so for example, you got Java, JavaScript, C#, Python, a lot of the big languages that they have a library for working with LLM. So that's really exciting to see. But one thing that you need to get though is an API key. And here you need to make a decision. You need to decide whether you want to work directly towards OpenAI or if you want to work against the hosted version on Azure. There are pros and cons to using each, and I'll show you how to work with each. So there's something else that you need to know, and that is that there are different languages on different levels. So OpenAI, it's a low-level language, meaning that it really just wraps web endpoints and makes it easy for you to do what you need to do, right? Which is to send out text prompts or image prompts and you get some kind of response back. That's great. But if you want some more high-level concept, because you're in the business of building really complicated applications, maybe you're building agents, for example, or you need the application to have memory, then it's a good idea to look at LangChain or semantic kernel. So, LangChain, you can use Python with that, for example, but with semantic kernel, which is by Microsoft, you can use a variety of different languages like C#, Python, Java, and so on, right? So choose whatever you need your app to be, but I do recommend starting with the OpenAI library to just learn the fundamentals. Right, so what did we choose? Well, we chose Python. It's a general purpose language. It's trusted by millions, so why not, right? And we also chose to work with the OpenAI library, which is written in Python, but I believe it exists for different languages. I think JavaScript at least. So let's see how we would do this high level. How would we actually build an application? Well, for one, you need to configure. So you need to do things like installing the libraries you need, and then you need to import the libraries you're going to use. And then you need to configure it so that the LLM knows that you are you, which involves you sending across maybe endpoint URLs, API keys, and things like that. So once you've done all that setup, then the fun part begins, right? Which is you sending an input and you get an output back. So, and what you can see here on the right side is how we do kind of the boring setup part, right? So first we install the library with pip install, and then we're creating an app.py file to host our application. And then we start importing OpenAI that we use to connect to the LLM. We're importing OS because we want to read environment variables. And we import .env because this is a fantastic library that enables you to separate secrets from code, because you don't want secrets in your code, right? Because what if you commit that by mistake to GitHub and then your secret is out there, someone else is using your API key? You don't want any of that. So get into the habit of separating your secrets from your code. And here you can see now how we are using it to reset the API key, but you see the very 3 last rows of this code is Azure specific. So we're setting API type, we're setting API version, and we're setting the API base. So, and once we've set all these values, then I think we're almost done. Continuing with our app, you see that we set the prompt, and the prompt is really your input. So you decide what goes here. So what we've said at this point is to say, hey, we want you to tell a fairy tale. So for that reason, we want you to complete the following sentence. Once upon a time, there was a something, something. And here you can see how we're also setting the engine and deployment name. And once you've set all these things, then I believe we are up and running. We are connected towards the LLM, and now we can send in our input. And we do that by calling OpenAI completion.create. And we send in the engine parameter, we send in the prompt, which is our input, and we send in max tokens, how many tokens it's allowed to use. And yeah, lastly, we are looking at a response, which we're getting back, and we dig deep into this choices array and then the text property. And this is how we output the text that comes back from the LLM. That's really all there is to build a very simple application with text generation apps and LLM. That's all there is to it. So let's demo. Let's see how this works. So we're going to go to Visual Studio Code. So you'll see the code inside of an editor, and we'll also run this code. So here we see how we have opened app.py and all the things we talked about, how to import things, how to use .env to load in secrets into our environment variables happens here. And here we see how our environment variables are being read, first the API key, and then we're setting some specific things just because we are using Azure OpenAI. If you're using OpenAI, you don't have to do these 3, right? And here you see how we set the prompt that says complete the following. Once upon a time, there was a something, something. And then we're setting the engine. This is just configuration. We set deployment, again, configuration. And here is where the exciting part happens, right? We are making our completion, we are talking to the LLM, and we are sending it the engine and the prompt and the number of tokens it should use. And now we are processing the response so that it outputs itself. It looks fantastic, right? So how can we get this to work? Well, Python app.py. We're going to run this code and see what it outputs. We always have to wait a few seconds, right? Because it takes a few seconds to get a response back. And you can see here that it outputs, once upon a time, there was a young girl who loved to read books. Well, fantastic. But yeah, as I said before, LLMs are non-deterministic, which means you will get a random response every time. So we can run this again and arrive at a completely different output. And now it's saying, once upon a time, there was a magical creature that could grant wishes. And if you think about it, you've just created a fairy tale application, right? So if you who are watching this, you have kids at home or nieces and nephews, you can just fire up this app and you can tell them a brand new story every evening before they go to sleep, and you're their favorite aunt or uncle or dad or mother, whoever you are who's watching. Ooh, here we got an entire story. I love it. What does it say? Once upon a time there was a kingdom that ruled by a king who had 2 daughters. All right. One day the younger daughter went for a walk in the forest. Yeah, we don't have time to read this entire fairy tale, but wow, right? Ooh, dragons, adventures. I love it. So let's look at another demo, right? Because you might be more interested in having something that you can use every day. So for that reason, I created an app that deals with recipes, because all of us need to eat, right? And we most likely have a cupboard. We open that cupboard and what do we see? Maybe 1 ingredient, maybe 10. But the point is you want help, right? So what you're doing is that, hey, you want to ask the user for how many recipes they need, what ingredients they have at home, and maybe some filter with ingredients that they definitely don't want as part of their recipe, for example, peanut. And you want to be able to send out a prompt that includes all of this user input, and you want the recipes back, right? But that's not all. You want this app to be really, really useful. So what you would need to add is a shopping list. And this is a secondary prompt where we can say, hey, produce a shopping list for the generated recipes, and please don't include ingredients that I already have. So here you can see our final secondary prompt that we are about to send after the first one, where we say, this is your prior context. This is what you use to generate. And here is the prompt shopping. And you end up getting a completion here. So let's see how this works. I've noticed that I actually have a bug in here, because I want to say ingredients is at home, and I want to be able to say ingredients. I can't even speak right. Ingredients at home. Right, so hopefully this app works better now. So what am I doing? Let's clear this a bit, and let's say Python. What am I typing? Nope, that's correct. App recipe pie. So at this point, I want to say I want 1 recipe. I have ice cream because I'm about to eat dessert, and I don't want you to put in peanuts because then I will have an allergic shock. So let's see what it does. And let it think. Ooh, what's going on here? Okay, let's scroll this up a bit. Let's see what we got. Ooh, a long recipe. I'm liking the looks of this. Okay, recipes. Brownie sundae ice cream cake recipe from Avery Cooks. All right. So brownie mix, oil, water, teaspoon vanilla extract. Hot fudge sauce. Sounds delicious. I actually get hungry just reading this. And looking at our shopping list, we see almond extract, butter, cocoa powder, beans, cheddar cheese, chili powder, This is interesting, and this is something called hallucination, right? Because it doesn't always does it perfectly, because I can agree that the first ingredients look very promising, but I promise you there is no black beans or kidney beans in or chili cheese in whatever you're trying to do. So this is where you should use your head, right? You see some kind of response back, this doesn't make sense. So what you should be doing is to go into your prompts and kind of author them better. So we might need to experiment a little with this, but let's try this again and see if we have a better response this time. Okay, app recipe. Let's say 1 recipe. Let's say I got chocolate at home, and again I am allergic to peanuts. I don't want that. Let's see what it does. But I think you get the idea of this app, right? Because you wanted to generate recipes based on what you have at home, and then you wanted to produce a shopping list with things that you don't have at home. So in an ideal world, this would be a fantastic looking app, right? Because it does exactly what it needs to do for me. So what's going on here? It says chocolate pistachio bark recipe. Bark? Like from a tree? Okay, pistachio, cayenne, salt, cocoa powder, sounds good. Preheat things, Dark chocolate, vanilla extract, pistachios, salt, cayenne pepper, light corn syrup. Now, this time around, it actually looks a lot better, but as you can see from the previous results, we got some weird output, right? And for that reason, it might be good to, make sure that whatever prompts we have look good and other things like that. There's one thing I wanted to mention also, right? Because we talked about temperature, and that's an important thing because temperature allows us to have roughly the same response back. So what we can do here is actually to set a temperature value. And here you can see how it's trying to add temperature for us. We're just going to do that. 0.7, I believe, is the default value that temperature is set with. But something very exciting is going to happen if I set it to 0.1, which means it will actually be predictable. If I set it to 1.0, it will be very, very random. And I might want that at times, right? Because I might not want this delicious looking chocolate treat every single day, right? Some other days I might want something completely different. But let's say I'm a creature of habit. Let's say I want exactly this one or whatever thing that is going to generate. So I'm going to try this again. I'm going to run this app. I'm going to say I have... So for my recipes, I always want the same thing. Chocolate. Yeah. Okay, I'm spelling this correctly. Yes. Peanuts. Right. Let's see what it comes back with. And so ideally now it's going to take my, chocolate pudding. I like the sound of that. So chocolate pudding. So let's see now if it actually obeys my thingy. So I'm going to write it again. 1, and I got chocolate. I'm expecting some variation on the response, but not a huge deviation. So chocolate, peanuts, what am I getting? Chocolate covered strawberries, chocolate pudding. So you can see I'm getting pudding again, right? So it seems to have, snowed in on pudding. So that's good. Chocolate cake, I don't mind that it adds chocolate cake to this. I really don't like chocolate is lovely. So yeah, this was really the gist of my lesson. So hopefully you understand now how to build text generation apps, how to even use more than one prompt, and also how you can configure the output a little bit using the temperature variable. And setting it close to 0 means that there's going to be very little randomness, but if you want a completely different dish every time, set it to closer to 1.0. So thank you so much for watching.